Friends, hello, this is Carter, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up, the podcast where writers talk. That's all it is. It's not very complicated. You don't have to pay too close attention to follow along. It's just a fun way for writers to talk to each other about the craft, about their latest releases, and kind of about the struggles of writing. So it's always fun for me to hear from other writers, kind of their journey and what paths that they've taken to get where they are. Before we get to today's guests, and yes, that's plural. I had two guests on today. I'm going to ask you a question. We trying to think about how much I can reveal now and how much is going to be announced by the time that this posts. I'm probably going to be doing an Unbound Writer writing retreat in Paris next October, so October 2026, along with a few other best-selling thriller and suspense writers. So it's going to be kind of a big deal, and I'm very excited about it. But I'm curious to know if any of you would be interested in something like that, a 2.5-day seminar, 2.5-day retreat. If you are interested and want to join a mailing list that's going to make sure you keep updated on information as it comes out about the retreat, just send me a quick email, just me@carterwilson.com, and let me know. We're trying to gauge early interest in something like this before we fully commit to it. So I'd love to hear from you if that's something that, not that you're committing to, but that you would be potentially interested in and want to know more. Just send me an email. All right. So today, man, what a fun conversation I had today. I just talked to Christina Baker Kline and Anne Burt. So Christina Baker Kline is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of several books, and Anne Burt herself is an award-winning author who's written many, many, many books. They have collaborated together on their first thriller, which was released in September, called Please Don't Lie, with Thomas and Mercer, and it launched a huge success. There's going to be a book 2, but this was their first book together. They've written different types of things in the past, mostly skewing towards literary fiction, and so this was their first venue into thriller writing, and it was just a really wonderful conversation. You know, I haven't had a whole lot of co-authors appear as guests at the same time on the show. So it's always interesting to me to find out how they work together, kind of what their process is. And these are two people who have known each other, I think they said 27 years. So they have a well-established history together. They've worked together on other projects. But it was wonderful. It was wonderful to hear not only the struggles and the joy of writing something that you haven't really written before, but also the ramifications of it. We went into a little detail on this, you know, and for example, with Christina, #1 New York Times bestselling author, you have expectations about what you're supposed to write. And she kind of said, I want to write a thriller. And her publisher said, no, we don't want you to do that. We don't want it ourselves, and we don't want you to do it with anyone else. So it was really fascinating digging into that. And at the end, we make up a fantastic story that I really want to know more. I probably cut it off a little bit too soon, but it'll leave you hanging. You're going to like this one, folks. This is my conversation with Christina Baker Kline and Anne Burt. It's, I've done a couple hundred episodes, and I maybe have had 3 or 4 where I've had co-authors as the guests. It's always exciting to me because the idea of it is so stressful. I've co-authored one book that we're shopping right now, but everyone has a different experience. I remember talking to Tess Gerritsen, and she didn't, the way that she talked about it, it wasn't as good of an experience as other people who just connect. But it sounds like you two know each other quite well and have known each other for a long time. Is that fair?
26 years.
Okay. I count that as a long time.
Kind of a while.
Where does that come from? Where does the relationship begin?
First of all, Carter, sorry, are we recording?
We are recording. Yes, this is.
Great.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So Anne and I met when she came to a reading I was doing for my second novel. I had recently moved to a suburb of New York called Montclair, New
Hmm.
Jersey, 10 miles away from the city. Really pretty, lots of
Cool.
writers, lots of musicians and journalists from the city. Anne moved a few years after I did, and I don't know if you want to tell the next part of the story, Anne, or I
Sure.
can continue.
All right, good. Yeah. So, yeah, Christina was already there. I moved from Brooklyn, and when I got there, right, as Christina said, Montclair at the time had this reputation, very artsy, all that. I was, promised that I would not miss Brooklyn, but I did. I was like in my
Hmm.
house, and
Interesting.
as I say, I was like, where is everybody? I don't know where to find them because I don't know what to do in the suburbs to find my people. And then I
Hmm.
saw an article actually in the then print Montclair Times, because that's what you did then. You got the print paper for the
You
local
read
event,
physical newspapers, yeah.
Believe it or not. Yeah.
newspapers, and then you said, "Oh gosh, here's the local bookstore." And Christina Baker Kline, who looks so interesting and smart and fabulous, is going to be there. And I resolved that I would be brave. And I would not only go to her reading, but introduce myself and see if she would be willing to have coffee with a newbie in town and just, help me out of my fear. And she was incredibly generous, incredibly nice. The next day called me again, old school, on my landline and said, "Hey, I have an idea. Instead of going for coffee, would you want to go to the movies, to a matinee and like play hooky?" And I
Hmm.
said, "Yes." And that was the beginning of a conversation that we had about movies, books, plot, character, ideas that just, it took off. Like we just had this intellectual spark where we were laughing at the same moments. We
Hmm.
really loved analyzing the same things. This is really fun too. Recently, Christina's husband actually researched what that film was.
Yeah, we had told this story a couple of times, and he was like, I need to know the movie because it obviously set this friendship in motion. So he went back through the archives, figured out what was coming out on that date. He figured out the date, and then what was playing at our local movie theater. And we discovered it was, which makes perfect sense for us, Run Lola Run. I don't know if you've ever
Oh, yeah. I
that
never saw it, but I
amazing
remember it.
film.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's so
great.
good, and it's kind of it is a thriller actually, and it's a female protagonist who's kind of intense and very complicated, and it set the conversation in motion that we've never really stopped having.
And that's, Christina, from your perspective, that's kind of interesting because you must have received some kind of initial energy from
Yeah,
Anne, right? Because I mean, I get the whole saying yes to coffee, but then to be like, let's go see a movie, you must feel, yeah, feel comfortable
yeah.
as opposed to like, oh, I don't know what this is going to commitment is going to be.
I know, you're right. It was so strange. I mean, we did a live event last night for, I don't know, 100 people or something. And the, what we were talking about was how it was a group of women who actually are in our town, Montclair. And I was saying, how it feels when you meet someone, you meet a lot of people when you move to a new town. And when you meet someone who just seems to share your sensibility, your sense of
Right.
humor, and it's always rare.
It
You
is
meet a lot
rare.
of people, but it's rare to have someone who, like, right away, you're like, oh, wait a minute, we kind of share something here. And we discovered we had gone to the same university. We didn't even know
Hmm.
that. We overlapped by a year, but we didn't know each other. And we both had parents who were academics. There were some similarities, even though there were major differences too. We had some things in common. And then the most surprising thing that we had in common is that we were both pretty much exactly the same amount pregnant. We
Oh, huh.
we ended up having babies 3 weeks apart. So we were for the next, whatever it was, 6 months, we were, getting to know each other. And then the babies were born. We lived like a 5-minute walk apart, and
Right.
we would just, go around the neighborhood with these babies and talking about
Those were
books.
both your first kids?
No,
Mine third.
Christina, yeah. It was Christina's third and my first. Christina, I don't
Okay.
know if you remember this. This is on point for the movie dates too. You actually taught me how to bring a baby to the movies because
Yes.
so Christina's third, I'm my first, right? You can imagine. I was like, "Bah!
Right.
What do I
No, the
do?"
movies is a great place for a baby.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
but the first so Christina was like, "Oh well, let's bring the babies to the movies." I was like, "Bring the babies to the movies!" I'm like, well, what about when it gets loud? And she says, "Oh, you just cover their ears." And I was
Right.
like,
Right.
"That's
The
what I'll
sound of
do."
the movie drowns out their screams. It's great.
Exactly. There is a way that like in a movie theater, a baby's like in this dark place that's like
Totally.
they're nestled up and
Totally.
so it was until they became toddlers and a little harder to control.
Right.
It
Right.
was easy to do that.
And from your perspective, it's kind of interesting as well. Just this idea of approaching an author and the idea of being a writer and having this, maybe the self-doubt, this uncertainty, this fear. I coach writing as well. And that's I love coaching on the psychology of writing because so much of it is that block. And this idea that you're approaching somebody that maybe you think is potentially unapproachable, and you realize, and I think this is true with most authors are highly approachable, especially in the thriller, mystery, suspense realm, my experience at least. Was that surprising for you that Christina just had such a positive reaction to you approaching her?
Absolutely. I mean, I thought she was going to be like, "Oh, look at that try hard," she's just so annoying.
Right.
Also, I had really recently come out of an MFA program.
Okay.
And, that was my background. Christina and I both are new to the psychological thriller world. This is our first psychological thrillers. Both of us also come from a literary background, very
Yeah.
much so.
Yeah.
And, okay, so the 1990s MFA program at NYU, it was nothing if not unapproachable. I mean, people wanted to have this sort of story that they built around themselves. There's personae, and, it's
Yeah.
this like cool downtown. And I was always a little bit like, hey,
Yeah.
and what's so interesting too, it's like I love the literary world. It's the world of books and ideas, etc. But wow, the people who write thrillers, as you were starting to say, Carter, I could not have found a more approachable, warm, fun, engaging community whose basic attitude is, oh, there's room for all successes here. Like there
Totally.
is no barrier. Like I'm a success, you're a success. I want you to be a success. Meet my people. You're so nice. It's
Right.
really
People
neat.
aren't making that decision to buy my book or your book,
Right. Maybe
generally
that's what
speaking.
it is.
Isn't it? The readers
That's what
love
it is.
the books. That's right.
Anne had an opportunity before I did to really see this in action because so as she said, we're both new to this, part of the reason that we think this works so well for the two of us is that we both came to this genre together. One of us wasn't already working in this genre.
Right.
So we kind of learned at the same time. But Anne, I had a longstanding obligation and couldn't attend, but Anne went to Thriller Fest.
That's great.
Which is in New York City. And I think that you just had a blast and realized how incredibly friendly everyone was, which
Absolutely.
was amazing to discover.
Yeah.
I mean, Carter, do you agree? Like, so I think it's because we actually figure out how to kill people and achieve justice on the page.
Yeah.
We're pretty, like warm and nice in real life.
Yeah. I mean, there's the duality of like, right. We get all the darkness out, and you hear horrible things about romance writers because they keep it all in.
Right. Yes. And
That's
also,
exactly
like,
right.
as you said, I do think people consume thrillers in a certain kind of way, and there's a lot of room for people to read your book. There are lots of ways that people can find your book, and also it's exciting for people to read lots of thrillers, who read thrillers. We in the event last night, the people who identified themselves as thriller readers were saying they read dozens and dozens, a year, way more than a lot of people do. So I do think there's this sense that like if there's a fun taught thriller, it's a joy to recommend it to your readers.
Totally. And that's what sells books, is that word of mouth. And I think people are able to get, and obviously there are several different layers of thrillers. We're talking a little bit more about psychological thrillers, but there's a darkness that people can explore in a fairly fast, efficient, propulsive manner that allows them to consume a book in 2 to 3 days. And, I think the downside of it is like, how do I stand out in somebody's head with that kind of consumption? And which you totally can, and especially if you are, and I'm curious to know from your perspective, coming from more kind of literary backgrounds, if you're injecting more observation, more world observation, more internal monologue in a thriller, which you totally can do in a very pithy kind of way. But all of a sudden the reader feels like, oh, that's pretty insightful, or that's pretty meaningful about life, surrounded by all of this propulsive action. Do you find yourself approaching the thrillers kind of with some of your other previous writing experience?
Absolutely. I mean, both Christina and I are drawn to the slow burn
Yeah.
thriller. For exactly that reason. You know, we in building this world together, a lot of the joy was the world building, was the atmosphere that we really wrote into, was really playing with character, with past experiences, with how that influences current actions, and we loved having that kind of work its way, kind of worm its way slowly forward, with all of the big twists and explosions really coming in the last third of the book.
Yeah.
And also,
Go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry, I was just going to add to that I grew up in Maine, in part, and Anne grew up going to the Berkshires, and we both have spent a lot of time in the Adirondacks, and we can talk more about that in a minute. But I think the atmosphere, creating an atmosphere, was very important to us, and we're both very deeply knowledgeable about wooded areas, mountainous areas, cabins in the woods kinds of things. So it was really fun to do that together.
Yeah, and I think what's important is to also kind of break down, not only the tropes, but the cliched expectations of what a psychological thriller should deliver. Working with students, you see a lot of like, well, let me give you this high octane prologue, which often is an empty promise, because then it just is 40 pages of backstory right after that. But there is this expectation that you can't have a slow burn, that it has to be right out of the gates. And I 100% disagree with that. But it's a question of like, well, what does this slow burn mean? Because you can have, rather than 3 pages of atmospheric description, you could have 2 very evocative, visceral sentences about the setting that the reader just fills in the blanks, and they're like, oh, I get it, because these 2 sentences are so well written. Did you find yourself having to play around with, making it a little bit more propulsive than maybe what you're used to,
Yes.
but still balancing that, there's no body on page 1.
Yeah. There's
So
no
that
body for a while.
Yeah. We had backstory bodies, but we didn't have front story bodies until quite a ways down the road. But yeah, I mean, part of the learning process for us was working with our editor, who has, edited, Thomas and Mercer, our publishers, I mean, they do exclusively thrillers and mysteries.
Right.
And so they're pros. They know what they're doing. And I feel like we really, really benefited from that, because we brought to the table, I'll give you an example. Our first draft that we submitted had a lot of decor in the house. Like
And architectural details.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. We did a lot.
We were all into that.
We were arranging cattails. I mean, we were doing a lot that
Right.
we know in a literary novel could be very weighted and heavy with portent. But
And we thought it was. We
Yeah.
actually thought it
and
was.
she was like, maybe less of that and a little bit more quick cut to the next scene. So it was really good.
We actually really learned so much about the propulsive nature of a thriller. And, we'd read thrillers, but we hadn't, or speaking for myself, hadn't really analyzed them. And it wasn't until we came up with this idea, and it began, the whole concept or idea of working together like this started when we were in a writer's room together, a Hollywood production company writer's room. And we kind of learned how to create cliffhangers. I mean, in my own work, I've done it instinctively, but not so purposefully. And like understanding to cut the chapter a little sooner than you thought you might, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
to keep the action moving forward was really important. And also, as you said, not weighting it down with backstory. And actually, I think it's an important lesson for literary writers too.
100%. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is important. And I think it's funny, because I think I'm a big believer in you should write from a space of how your own brain works. And sometimes that takes hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of words to figure out how your brain works. So for example, for me, I don't describe much in my books, not because I'm like, this is a thriller, I shouldn't just, it's just how my brain works. I'm like, I'm going to describe this in one sentence and the reader can fill it all in because that's how I like to read. I like to be given credit. And you realize like, oh, I've just made this more propulsive without trying to, or I have short chapters just because that's my sense, not because I do it on purpose. But you can quickly tell when somebody doesn't have that sense and they're shoehorning all that stuff in. Like every chapter ending is kind of this like, okay, it feels like this big thing, but it's not a big thing. So you must have found while writing this, like, oh, there must be some natural feeling behind it of like, oh, this is fun. You know, I feel how my brain can kind of work on this side as well.
And to have two brains in there, what was really fun was not only figuring out my brain and Christina figuring out her brain, but we came together ultimately after all the working and revising and really felt like the book itself has something that we've come to call our third voice. It's neither one of our voices, but it feels exactly right after all of that work for this book. For the next book, which is set in the same fictional town in the Adirondacks that this one is, you know, it is the third voice of our work together.
Because you set this one up intentionally as the first of a series.
Yes, and it's kind of a series, but it's more like Tana French does, that there are recurring characters and minor characters in one become major characters in the next. So
Right. Okay, so it's like Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad kind of a thing. Like now we're going to see this person's journey and focus on that, but you already know them.
Yes.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, you already know them, and it's so much fun to go back to the town of Crystal River that we, inhabit already, and sort of know where the coffee shop is and know where the bar is and things like that. So it just makes it kind of for us a little playground that we have already.
So what are the? I want to ask about the co-writing secondly, but first I want to know about. You have this idea. It speaks thriller to you. I assume that kind of came from you and not necessarily your respective agents, but you're like, this feels like a thriller. We want to write this thriller together, and it's going to be maybe a couple books. What are the ramifications of that as you start, really proposing this as an idea? As somebody who just co-wrote a YA thriller and hearing like, oh, YA, that's really hard and this and that. And my attitude is like, okay, but I want to write it because it's fun, and maybe it never goes anywhere, but there are real ramifications to like branching outside of what you're known for.
Yeah, and for me, they were real because my publisher was really unhappy with the idea. And they said,
Right.
like,
You different editor
dilute your
immediately.
brand, whatever.
Right.
There were all these conversations, and they were like, ugh, we don't want you to do that with us. We don't want you to do that with anyone else. But I had just switched agents for this very reason because I had a lovely agent, but she only wanted me to write it within the wheelhouse of the stuff I'd been doing.
Right.
And Anne and I mean, for many years, we have both done lots of different kinds of things and different kinds of writing. And we even edited a book together, a nonfiction book that was an essay collection. And I'm interested in a lot of stuff. And I didn't want to be. Frankly, I didn't start out writing fiction that was set in the past. I wrote contemporary novels first, some of which were suspense, and I just didn't want to feel like I had to do that for the rest of my life without any other kind of writing. And Anne and I had discovered by collaborating in a number of ways. We worked on an imprint together for a publishing house. We worked on a podcast. We worked on as I told you, we worked on a series, a limited series, and we every time we worked together, we learned something new. And what happened was that we were given the opportunity to, for a lot of money, back when podcasts had, like for a hot second, they had money, or some of them had a lot of money. And so they threw money at us to work on an idea, really just an outline that then screenwriters would turn into a scripted show. And when we did that, then we handed it in and they accepted it, and we were all excited to get our check. And our agent said, think he was looking at the contract and he said, you're giving away every single right to this. And we were like, yeah, we don't care. We just want the money. And he said, but I think you should consider writing this because it's a great idea. And we were like, but we just wrote the outline and it was easy.
Right.
But he knew we wanted to work on something together, and we had this crazy idea that we would have a million ideas, but he was like, this is actually a good one. Why don't you just hold your horses here? And he said, I think I could sell this for you if you do an outline and 3 chapters. So that's exactly what we did. And it wasn't an easy sell because I think people were like, what? What are you trying to do here? But when Thomas and Mercer came forward and basically did a preempt after there were all these people circling around and they weren't sure. And then they were like, well, we're sure. We're going to take a chance on you guys. And that was the moment that we were like, okay, we're going to do it. And so we had already hammered out a 120-page outline that was kind of like screenplay length, It was like, It was great. It had dialogue, it had description, and of course we deviated from it. But that was how it started, is we really did flesh it out. And then Anne, I don't know what you want to say there, but that was the beginning of that.
Well, that's what led to Please Don't Lie that came out on September 1st. But yeah, I mean, back to the question that you were asking, Carter, about like the implications. Christina has had #1 best-selling New York Times books.
Right.
And when she was talking about her agent saying, oh, I don't want you to dilute your brand. I mean, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be diluting Christina Baker Kline's brand.
Right.
I'm going to be the bad guy and ruin her career. And like her whole family's going to hate me and she'll be impoverished. And it's going to be on my conscience, my soul forever.
No.
Yeah. So I was a little worried, but that has not happened. Thank goodness. I've been the kind of writer in the books that I've published over the years. Like every single one has been in a different type of book, a different genre, a different kind of publisher, a different kind of publication. I feel like I've published 4 books and there have been 4 debuts. And so for me, I'm just sort of that's how it has gone so far. And I'm constantly looking like, it's just, as you said, it is how my brain is put together. I'm like, but what haven't I tried? And maybe I'm not going to be the best or the most famous or the most successful at those things, but I'm so curious about what those things are and what can I do if I try those things.
Well, and I think it's that inherent curiosity that produces the best writing in general. I think the best writers are those who are just inherently curious and tenacious, and they come up with something. It doesn't always work, but it's not a waste because they've always learned something from it. And I picture, just because of your relationship and the length of your relationship, I pictured the writing process not necessarily being easy, but the co-writing process being easier than some others, because you obviously know how to not only be together as friends, but have had experience working together. But you made a really interesting comment earlier about the third voice. And so that's what I'm curious about, because the natural inclination is, if you have a dual point of view, you could be like, all right, let's just each take a point of view and my voice will come out and your voice will come out. But how did you approach this one? Did you say, like, do you want to just physically write this together? You want to alternate chapters? What do you want to do?
Yeah. So the way it worked for this book is that we had that incredibly detailed outline that was very voicey. We already had
120 pages. Yeah, it has to
be. We built that together. Like we talked it through.
Yeah. We were, at this table and at that table that Anne's at. We were, literally, we live 6 blocks apart in New York City. Right. And we're not always here, but we were. Yeah, we built the book together. And then we wrote the first 3 chapters, and we really did, again, work very hard on like, what is our, we had a pseudonym before we sold the book. We were going to be Anna Baker. So we call her Anna, our third voice. But they ended up wanting our names to be on the book. But anyway, we wrote these 3 chapters, and then I was under contract for a book that's coming out in May. I have a novel called The Foursome that will be out next May, and I had to finish. I had to turn it in.
That's with the publisher who was annoyed.
Yeah. HarperCollins is like, get your book done. So, so I had to turn to that, and Anne was like, I'm going to just get the rest. I'm going to plow through the rest. And she did. And so she finished the first draft. And then I had finished my draft of the other book, and I came back, I pivoted the next day and started from page one and just did a big thorough, she had done this beautiful, like getting it all out. I did the next draft, and then drafts 3, 4, and 5, and 6, 7, and 8, or however many there were. We really were together. We were either on Zoom,
sentence
but
by
mostly
sentence.
in person.
Wow.
We really know at this point, like, that none of the sentences are Christina's sentences or Anne's sentences. They're us sentences. We didn't let a single one go by that we weren't both signing off on. And we didn't want to write a dual voice book. I think for us, really, the challenge was, can we find one single fluid voice? That's what made it exciting.
Right. That remains consistent enough to appear as its own voice.
That's exactly right. That's right. And that always, part of why we work as a writing team is because we had the same goal for what this book would look like if it was good.
Yeah.
And that really was, I think, the overarching goal, is it would be seamless. It would be a voice that was the voice for the book. And that's what we wanted. We didn't want that sense of stutter start alternating chapters, which can work. But, you got to have the same goal as your co-writer. Otherwise, I think you do get lost along the way. And that was important for us.
Yeah. And that extensive outline is the goal. You've already agreed to the goal. And I think you writing the book initially, the draft, and, like that first draft is always the hardest thing, whether you're writing together or alone. So just having it done, like, okay, we have a rough sculpture here. Now we can chisel at it together. But the really hard work is done. Probably the outline's the really hard work. But that gives you the momentum.
That's right. And then, the other thing is, because we both know each other really well. I know how good and thorough Christina's mind is, and how smart she is on the page, and how devoted she is to seeing something through. So the trust is there. And that works in two ways as a team of writers. One, I trust that, like, even though we both have other projects, we both have other things we have to do, when she's in, and that's it. And I never for one second question that. And the other trust is with working on a first draft for an extended period of time without my co-author, I trusted that I could give her, rough writing as well as sophisticated writing. That some parts I would be like, okay, this stinks, but you know where we're trying to go here. And you can't always, as a writer, feel safe, right? Giving your unedited, word vomit to somebody else. But I feel safe with Christina because I know
you wouldn't do that to your editor or to your agent.
Right.
No,
even if you're that close, you feel like a little sheepish about it.
Yeah.
This was the great thing, is that, Anne could say, and then here, this should happen. And we did the, but also I think, fully trust each other and fully respect each other. When we were thinking about doing this, Anne and I sat down with several writing teams, famous writing teams, like people who have since fallen apart, actually, and understood what it was that's different about us. We were both approaching this not as, say, writer and editor, as some of them are and have, or with people coming at it with entirely different backgrounds. But Anne and I just had sort of a bedrock of respect and trust coming into it. And I think we both understood that what we want from this. And I will say one other thing about this book, Please Don't Lie, which is that we weren't trying to subvert or redo the psychological thriller genre. We were trying to write a good psychological thriller. Sure. So it's not, there are tropes in this book that are recognizable to people who read thrillers, of course. But so we were sort of teaching ourselves, but we also just wanted to write a book that would surprise people who aren't used to being surprised, or who are often not surprised, by what is going on. And also, we wanted it to be a delightful reading experience. As we go along with the next books, we may do more experimental things, or we may not. But for this one, we really wanted to just write a good, solid thriller.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. And I think there is a misconception that thrillers all have to hit certain points along the journey. I don't think that's true at all. I think there's a lot of latitude within a thriller to do a lot of different things. I think the biggest trope is that there has to be a twist. And that always drives me nuts because I'm like, well, I'm following somebody's journey and their journey is interesting and it's exciting and it's propulsive and it's scary. Why does there have to be a twist? For me, because I'm not outlining, if the twist just occurs to me and it's real and it feels organic, then it's in. If it feels like fabricated, then why would I put that in there? And people are okay if you don't have the plot twist. I think, I don't know.
I think also there's sometimes people have a misconception about what it means to have a twist. I mean, a twist doesn't necessarily mean the cavalry rushes in, that old
Right.
or thing. A twist can mean a reversal. It can mean, something that just
A character
comes as a
reveal.
surprise to the character themselves,
Yeah.
or to the people who know the character best. For Please Don't Lie, the book is about knowing, thinking that you know the people in your life, but maybe you don't.
Right.
That's what we were playing with all of the characters. So when there are twists, the twists come from revelations that somebody who you think that you've known and know intimately, maybe you don't.
Right. Even though now you look back retroactively, like, oh, I see that trail of breadcrumbs where I should have realized this all along.
That's right.
And that's a very common, psychological thriller, if you wanted to call it a trope. But within that trope, there's a million different ways that you can approach it. And I think the goal is to feel this could be me. This is, even though this hasn't happened to me, now I'm thinking about the people I know.
That's right.
And if you can achieve that and make it visceral, it becomes exciting.
Carter, you know what's wild? Your new novel, Tell Me What You Did, it looks like our novel. I mean, the typeface, the colors, and the actual illustration.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Are almost identical. It's wild. I was noticing that earlier when I was looking at your website and your work. So it's very funny. Like they could be companions on a shelf together.
Well, and it's crazy because, as you know, and I'm not sure how Thomas and Mercer does it, but with source books, it's very thoughtful, right? Including my titles change and because we were testing things and this and that, and they came to me and, so it's got to be this non-serif font on the cover and this and that. And they came to me with this cover and there's usually a back and forth and I'm like, don't change anything. I love how the orange pops.
I know.
You got to think about how it displays on a 5-inch screen. That's so funny.
And have you looked at his cover?
Right.
Yes, it's
unbelievable. Yeah.
The geometry of the cover is, it's so funny.
Carter, hold up your cover. It's right behind you, right?
Yeah. It's really, here, we'll put them together. Yeah.
Isn't that wild?
That is wild. Yeah.
And you even have the person in the glass.
Yeah. This is my protagonist in her little Vermont farmhouse.
Yeah. Well, there, you could drive to our house from your.
You could drive to our house. Carter, I have a question for you. Yes. Do you have any advice for us as someone who is a seasoned thriller writer? And maybe your audience would enjoy hearing it too.
Well, it doesn't sound like you're doing anything wrong.
Well, yeah, but you have 9. You've got 9 more of them than we do. So
yes.
Yeah, how many points of view in your book?
This one has 1. The next one has 2.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of one point of view. I write. My 5th book was where I can look back now and be like, oh, that's my voice. And that's when I switched to first person, present tense, female point of view. And it just becomes this, I think writing first person, present tense allows you to do so much because it can be almost stream of consciousness. Yes. Certainly you can abandon a lot of formal structure, and that can lead to really tight, fast-paced scenes, 2-word paragraphs, things like that, because that's how our brains work when we think and when we're in a frantic situation. So I've really leaned into kind of that, you're not going to see a steady, logical flow, thought flow coming from this person, you're going to see the emotion. Because I think the best psychological thrillers are emotion forward. So character over plot, but emotion over character. I want to know how my protagonist feels on every page without beating the reader over the head with it. But it sounds like I'm sure you're already doing that.
No, that's such great advice. And actually, Anne, that inspires me. Next one, maybe we'll try present tense, because you're right. There's a propulsion to it and a kind of way that you can do a shorthand, because you're leaning into the emotion and the cerebral stuff.
Yeah. And again, but it wasn't necessarily this logical thought. It was, let me try this. And then kind of realizing like, oh, this is what I'm good at. Yeah. But it took me 5 books to get there to realize like, oh, this is again, how my brain works best writing like this. And I think, a lot of people approach POV of like what serves the story best, which I agree with, but I do think ultimately it's like, what are you best at and what story can serve your talents?
Yeah.
And that just takes a lot of writing to figure that out.
It does.
And please don't lie, in this one, we played around, it's in close third at present tense.
Yeah.
And we did play and say, oh, well, let's try a little first person and see if it works. And we lost something in that.
And it's having that awareness that we lost something. A lot of people don't have that. They're like, well, I'm just going to do it this way. And I've made that mistake too. I've doubted myself. And then my editor's like, this is terrible. I'm like, all right, let me switch the tense. And then all of a sudden it pops because, so having that awareness.
Wild, isn't it? How that, I've written almost entire drafts in third, say, and changed to first, realizing that I need that immediacy, and all my books are different. And I love having that kind of, it's often a key to unlocking a story point of view one way or another. And that would be a whole lecture on its own that we could all give.
And I think you can't develop that sense if you haven't read a million books. Really.
No. And I think even after reading a million books, sometimes you still don't have enough of the sense. You need your group, right? You need your trusted people, because at the end of the day, no matter how good we are, you still lose track of your book because you're just living it. And you need somebody else to say this. So I wrote a book, third person past tense, about a 21-year-old female savant in 1987. And because I just doubted myself, I'm like, I can't get close enough to someone who's so different than me to be first person present. But what I did was I made her more distant, and I hadn't realized that. And my editor's like, I'm not connecting to her. And when I redid 20 pages first person present, she's like, oh, there she is. And I'm like, but I couldn't see it for myself. You do need those experts in your life who you trust.
Carter, do you find, sorry to ask you questions, but do you find that your editor is an important part of your process still?
She is, for sure. I would put, I don't show anyone anything. And then I show my agent first because she's an editorial agent. She will just go line by, give me great notes. And then I give it to my editor. And sometimes they're at odds with each other. My editor will be much more big picture. Like, I want to see more of this person, or I'm just not feeling quite that this feels a little masculine over here, or whatever it is. And then the best part is that they give you the agency, right? They don't tell you, do this. They say, this is how it made me feel. And then they give you then you get that, and you're like, okay, I totally get it. I know I can make this better. And they're always right. That's the beautiful part. Like, it's always overwhelming, of course. And I've heard, I don't know if this is the case with you two, but I've heard Thomas and Mercer often has 2 editors.
Yes.
So
that's right.
So that's very stressful.
At first that was very weird. We were like, wait, what? But it turned out to be fabulous.
Yeah, no, and that's what I've heard too. And that's because you two have the right attitude, because it's always, no matter what it is, it's overwhelming. Now you get the editorial letter, you're like, oh shit, like this is like, why are there so many pages to this? But then I think the best writers look at it and they get past the fear, and they're like, I'm so excited to make this book better, because I can identify that 90% of your comments are great comments that I wish I would have thought of before. And usually the comments I don't agree with are very, very minor. They're not going to
We had a developmental editor who's done hundreds of thrillers. And so she knew what she was
part of the
doing.
Thomas and Mercer team. They brought her.
Yes.
That's their 2-editor team
Yeah,
thing.
they have an acquiring editor and then a developmental editor. And we were just blown away with the professionalism of this person who just really was so granular. We were grateful. We knew that it was going to help the book, and it really did. It was like we learned how to write a thriller doing this.
The other thing that we had was one of the best copy editors I have ever had in any book that I've ever written. I mean, he went to the level of detail of like researching topographical maps in the Adirondacks for a specific day and time 2 years prior to make sure that there was like, a meteorological reliability to what we were doing. It was awesome.
Well, as we all know, thriller readers will do the same thing.
I know. Yeah, that was the crazy thing was embarking on this experience and then realizing that the people who read thrillers are so brilliant, shrewd, intense, and they notice everything.
They do. Realism is important because you have to stretch the believability usually for your general plot, but within that world, to me it's very important that everything is real. Like,
yes,
somebody gets shot in the kneecap. They're not running away. Everything has consequences, and everything can tie back to different things within kind of this maybe unbelievable premise.
It's kind of like doing a puzzle or something, or like a math problem, because it's so intricate to be able to pull off extreme emotion and extreme irrationality to some degree. I mean, in order to get into a situation where people are dying, there's irrationality happening.
There's bad decisions being made. Yeah,
there be bad decisions being made, but they have to be believable. They can't be too crazy. So grounding those and yet having extreme things happen is very intense.
Right, and then the balance at the same time of having these bad decisions not be so frustrating to the reader of like, why don't you just go to the police or whatever it is? There's got to be this logic. Like, this is what, so I'm always saying, what would I do?
Yeah.
And I think about something more interesting than what I would actually do, but still within the realm of this is what a human, I think, would react to this who didn't have the resources to do X, Y, or Z. So, but it's a balance.
Anne and I actually wrote an article about, I can't remember who it was for, but it was about technology. Was it LitHub, Anne? I can't remember. But anyway, it was about writing a thriller and grappling with all the technological ways that things have changed and the ways people could figure things out now that they couldn't, even Ring cameras and things.
Right. Yeah. It's that's why I love writing books set in the 80s, because it's like, that's a thriller's playground, because you agree to meet a friend in the woods, and if they don't show up, then you're just, there's no contacting them.
That's right.
Well, we're going to wrap up. Before we do, we're going to do our little storytelling. So this is the making it up part of the show. I've chosen 3 books at random, mostly at random, from my bookshelves. I'm going to have you choose one of them. We're going to choose a random sentence from a random page. I'm going to read that sentence, and that's the first sentence and maybe a 2-minute long short story. So I'm going to read that sentence, and then we can alternate back and forth what goes next, what sentence goes next. It'll be awful, so no pressure. I've done this 200 times, and I get nervous every time. So we'll see how it goes. I've got Wendy Walker's Blade. I think this is also Thomas and Mercer. It's not out yet. It's out in January.
Yeah, I saw it's getting good buzz, and she blurbed you.
Yeah, she's a good friend. She's amazing. Chris Pavone's The Doorman, and Angie Kim's Happiness Falls. So I'm going to talk to Angie in a couple of weeks here in Denver, actually. So that'll be fun.
Oh, great.
So
tell her we said hi. Love Angie.
Oh, wonderful. So choose one of those.
You pick, Christina.
Let's do Wendy Walker, because we haven't met her yet.
Yeah,
You know the others.
when we were talking earlier about just the tremendous heart of thriller writers, that's Wendy. She's just very giving. So give me a page between 1 and 284.
All right, 107.
Okay. So I'm going to quickly scan page 107. All right. You can do whatever you want with this sentence. This is first person present tense. This stops me in my tracks.
You pick one of us to start.
Anne,
Okay.
go for it.
It stops me in my tracks. I've never seen a house painted purple that was so ugly and yet so enticing.
All right, Christina.
The front walkway is bright yellow. The door is green. And the crazy thing is, no one seems to be home, and yet it's wide open.
I feel like I'm in a Tim Burton movie, but I'm only 3 blocks from my home. Strange that I'd never noticed this house before. Stranger is the open door, but the oddest thing, and perhaps the singular disturbing thing, is the smell that I can take in 30 feet from the front door.
It's this incredible combination of both nostalgia and mystery. I know this scent is reminding me of something. Is it my childhood? Was it a dream? But it's both frightening and utterly compelling at the same time. Something happened in my past, I know it, that was related to this scent.
I can't look away from the front door. And almost without realizing it, I find myself moving up the steps and across the porch and glancing or peering into the gloom.
I think we call it there. I'm creeped out.
I'm very
Although I will say, I love the fact that, Anne, you started literally with architectural detail that we were told to cut.
Exactly.
You got to do something with it. I mean, it's still in there. It didn't get into the book.
That was great. I want to go into that house, and I want to, of course, I'm picturing just a pile of bodies in the upstairs bedroom.
Well, I thought it was going to be putrid, but now I'm really intrigued by the nostalgia.
I know. Anne went for how the smell is the most powerful memory factor, and I want to know what happened to that person in their past.
That was
I'm not sure I do, but yeah.
What a fun time talking to the both of you. Thank you for your
so
time.
great,
And
Carter.
maybe you'll both be, you're stone's throw from Thriller Fest, so I hope to see you there next year. I work with the debut authors at Thriller Fest, so I'm there every year.
Oh, great. Let's definitely try to meet up when we're there, Carter.
Awesome. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. All right, that is it. That is it for this episode of Making It Up. I loved it. That was such an engaging conversation. I felt like I could have gone longer and longer. Would love to sit down with both of them, hopefully at Thriller Fest, and just talk to them some more. They were very engaging to talk to. Their new book is Please Don't Lie, their first thriller, book 1 in the series. And you can find out more about each of them at ChristinaBakerKline.com and AnneBurtWriter.com. And pop on over and learn about me. I'm at CarterWilson.com. And if you're interested in any of my Unbound Writer coaching services, retreats, that kind of thing, you can go to UnboundWriter.com. If you are interested in potentially attending a 2.5-day writing retreat in Paris next October 2026, shoot me a message at me@CarterWilson.com, just so I can get an idea about early interest. That is it. That is it for this episode of Making It Up. There'll be another one out just next week. As always, thank you so much for watching and or listening. Take care.